So we will move now to our second presenter today. It's Dr. Iryna Yahodzynska. And Dr. Yahodzynska holds a PhD degree in musicology. She's an associate professor at Kharkiv Kotlяревsky National University of Arts. She also served as an artistic education department deputy chief at the State Agency of Ukraine on Arts and Artistic Education. She has been teaching music history at several universities in Ukraine for 15 years, and her research interests focus on sociology of music, cultural policies, commemorative practices, and modern Ukrainian classical music. And her talk for us today is entitled Altered Soundscapes Around Ukrainian Music in Wartime. So Dr. Yahodzynska, please. Thank you for sharing your work with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm really excited and grateful for this opportunity to share my work with you. Just by way of introduction, a few words about the title of my presentation, as it might seem a bit tangled. So what I'm actually focusing on is a social cultural shift in Ukrainian society provoked by this Russian-Ukrainian war and reflected in music. By music here, I mean rather so-called classical or art music in all aspects of its existence, which means composing, performing, listening to it. So today's talk is a kind of overview of the changed landscapes of Ukrainian music after February 2024, and a meditation on how music not only reflects on the wartime reality, but creates a new one as well, contributing to our post-colonial identity. So, shall we? That was early March 2022 when two musicians from the Kyiv Symphony Orchestra came to Kyiv's Central Square, Maidan Nезалежності, to perform the Ukrainian national anthem and Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Ninth, also known as the Anthem of the European Union. Meanwhile, in Kharkiv, in the east, solo cellist Denis Karachintsev started filming himself performing European and Ukrainian classics against backdrop of buildings damaged or destroyed as a result of massive Russian rocket attacks. And these photos, taken by a friend of him, Alexander Osipov, went viral around the world. As a civic and artistic move, not to mention personal courage here, these manifestations marked a kind of modus operandi for Ukrainian music in 2022, between political statement and act of resistance. After recovering from the initial shock and taking into account the vast migrational wave inside the country and abroad, musical collectives and institutions showed an extraordinary mobility. Along with another wave of civic activity, or another, because I recall the same wave of activity back to 2014-15, transforming theaters and concert halls into volunteer stations, refugee centers or shelters. Musical life, with some reasonable exceptions, didn't stop for a single day. Furthermore, these challenging and really dramatic circumstances allowed for new creative units, sometimes gathering musicians from different regions of the country, as well as new formats of musical life aimed at both Ukrainian and international audience. Mapping these new formats, I just can't not mention those inspired partially by Denis Karachintsev's move, when classical musicians started performing open air in the affected cities, especially in Kharkiv, often literally like next day after the attacks, on film and posted almost immediately. These concerts were eloquent statements for Ukrainian community and for international community. Another phenomenon of great significance back then were concerts in shelters, basements, undergrounds, you name it, which also started from Kharkiv, as the city was under continuous rocket attacks. These were firstly spontaneous events within the Kharkiv Music Fest, well-known classical music festival in the city, which was held in subway just out of the will to resist, not to cancel the concerts. It was held in subway where residents were hiding or were taking cover, most of whom had been living there at the time. It's really important to mention that due to geographical location, as Kharkiv is really close to the border, any missile fired from the territory of Russia reaches Kharkiv like in approximately 45 seconds. So quite often air raid alert sounds simultaneously with the explosions. So taking place literally between explosions, these concerts were named accordingly. And along with musical classics, European classics, Ukrainian music performed within the concerts found an extraordinary response. This for sure was a moment of remarkable solidarity. And yeah, for those remaining in the city, in the frontline city, both musicians and residents who didn't leave for personal reasons, and who got united through music, and in particular Ukrainian music. Just to give you an idea or to remind what was it like, here is a short video, just video clip posted on the official website of the festival, Kharkiv Music Fest. And of course, it's an edited video, but the initial recording was the opening concert of the festival in March 2022. I'm sorry, just trying to. Here I recognize some of my former colleagues and students among performers, and they were playing a really famous piece by Miroslav Skorik called Melody. It has become a kind of banner of Ukrainian music since the full-scale invasion. And it has been performed countless times all around the world. Yeah, just by different musicians in solidarity with Ukraine. And in terms of emotional effect or power, these moments and these concerts, they were similar to civic unrest in the Kyiv subway, for instance, when residents who had covered during another raid would spontaneously begin singing Ukrainian folk songs, like the well-known Oi Luza Червона Kalina, and that was likely the only way to protest and to overcome the fear. And of course, these all were rather situational formats of musical life, and having fulfilled the function as both as consolidating and therapeutic, they were no longer needed. However, they became not only new cultural norm, because these concerts and shelters are also popular these days. It's a kind of a stable format of musical life, but they also marked a kind of common semantic field of senses crucial for our wartime society. Another significant change in musical life was related to repertoire policies, which I tend to describe as radical dismantling. One after another, national, state, private theaters, philharmonic, concert halls started excluding Russian music, both contemporary and classical, from their programs, rearranging concert programs for several years ahead. This was followed by a refusal of any contacts with Russian performers, soloists, conductors, etc. And it's really important to emphasize that it's not just a political statement, a political move. These decisions made by musicians, collectives, and cultural managers. So it's not just a desire to distance themselves from all the things Russian, meaning Russian is a political nation and everything belonging to it. But we should take into account this ethical aspect of the issue. Just to make it more clear, I'll give you an example. So after some 600 people were killed in Mariupol, those who were hiding in the building of Mariupol Drama Theater, one of the Russian orchestras, I don't remember exactly if it's Kremlin Orchestra or Mariinsky Orchestra, came to Mariupol to perform Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony there, which I personally find extremely cynical. Yeah, but given that, under no circumstances can be Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony or any other score, any other piece written by Tchaikovsky performed in Kiev or any other city in Ukraine. Yeah, and what is really crucial here, and what I keep explaining to my Western colleagues, that in this case, it's not like Tchaikovsky's legacy itself or Tchaikovsky's personality itself that is being banned. What we're doing here is a kind of semantic war. So the ideological manipulations and the context of performing Tchaikovsky's music have given his music a completely new meanings and connotations that are absolutely unacceptable for Ukrainian society. But even more than an attempt to overcome this trauma of war, this dismantling course has enabled long overdue changes and triggered processes needed like decades ago. And here I'm afraid we won't do without an extended remark. It's obvious and it's like a commonplace these days to mention that independent Ukraine inherited from the late Soviet system not only institutions, structures, and processes, but also narratives inseparable from them. But what is really important is that both the processes and narratives haven't been revised for quite a long time. So the public intellectual discourse that should have begun in the 90s with acknowledgement of the post-colonial status of Ukrainian culture, and which, to my opinion, could provide a necessary framework for rethinking our past, it just simply did not happen. So neither in the 90s nor in the 2000s, so neither relevant cultural policies, at least for music art, nor an official discourse was introduced. Okay, there were absolutely sure thing individual efforts of Ukrainian musicologists that cannot be denied. Here I'm aware of them, of course, but they did not form, unfortunately, a sustainable trend or at least a strong voice until recent years. So the national musical process, so to say, just including in education and infrastructure, musical life just continued along the same Soviet lines, which meant, for example, that both the education or repertoire were occupied by so-called gold standard, which is European classics, and Russian ones, which were incorporated into the Soviet musical canon in roughly the same proportion. And that all affected Ukrainian musical process dramatically in the long run, leading to the loss of national music agency for both the Ukrainian society and internationally. So it was not just reflecting on that really known dichotomy metropolis-province, but this situation reflected also on the well-known historical narrative of the primacy of Russian and secondarity of Ukrainian music culture. And actually that is narrative the Ukrainian musical community found themselves in the outbreak of a full-scale war. But what is important that it's not just a political statement that shift in repertoire policy, because it actually extended initial expectations, because as a vacated space in concert programs was shiftly filled by national music, both classical and contemporary, and the latter was of special importance, as it enabled plenty pieces and scores written during the war and the circumstances to war to find their way to Ukrainian listeners like immediately, and thus triggering the emergence of a sense of community. But this also launched reinterpretation of Ukrainian music, little known or forgotten for several reasons, for various reasons, and its return to the current sound reality, at least in Ukraine. Along with that, a number of questions have arisen about the past and present of Ukrainian musical culture. For instance, how should we consider the music of so-called Ukrainian Creole tradition, using the term of Benedict Anderson? What about musical texts created during the Soviet period that are like uncomfortable or a bit controversial from the current national identity perspective? Should they become an integral part of our musical life as well? Or how can they influence our memory, our cultural memory? And so I think solving these issues, quite complex and sophisticated, requires a new post-colonial optic, balanced analytical look at multi-layered phenomena, which is to carry features of both national and Creole culture. But as Ariella Azali once said, you cannot, it's just impossible to decolonize a museum without decolonizing the word. So we are about to start doing that. But the very fact that such questions arise in public discourse, for me, is absolutely like a significant breakthrough. And the war affected composing music as well. And there was a strong artistic response to this existential civilizational crisis. Here is just a short list of the pieces written after February 24, 2022. Of course, this list is not complete, it's incomplete actually, but my colleague, Dr. Iryna showed you during her presentation a much more extended list already. So also it's impossible to reframe the diversity of this music composed in 2022 to a single trend. Many of these pieces written after the invasion have lots in common. And one of this is grieving tone. So being texts of memory, texts in memoria, most of them are actually requiems, more or less, written literally by the witnesses. Some of these pieces, like Lacrimosa Bucci, by Victoria Polivar, reflects on specific events, also known, while others, like Lacrimosa by Alexander Chetinsky, I consider it as rather as an attempt to comprehend, to reassemble reality after unfolding catastrophe. And speaking of historical parallels, I would recall Polish composer's response to the introduction of martial law in Poland in 1981-83, which also resulted in several really expressive requiems. Reflecting both on the personal and collective experience of the first weeks after the invasion, full of horror, confusion, and this feeling of approaching a looming catastrophe. These pieces are also work in their own way with a category of time, rather psychological time. And so we have here a lot of sound images of frozenness, trembling, static. Presenting vast stylistic diversity, many of these compositions use nevertheless the same semantic field of new musical lexemes, like sonic effects of air raid alert, red is symbol of destruction and chaos. And that is, for example, how it's designed in Chetinsky's Lacrimosa. Just a few words about Chetinsky. He's from Kharkiv, originally left for Kiev several years ago, many years ago actually, and he spent those first days after invasion in Kiev working on this piece. And Lacrimosa was first performed in Lviv, which is April 2022, the same time when the Kiev was under attack. Just to show you how the sound image of air raid alerts works here. It's a kind of background that literally eats up the sound reality of this piece. So new circumstances contributed a lot to the social functionality of art music and just this activity, composing music. Being personal artistic moves, some of these scores written after February 24th can also be considered testimonies and documents of work, but also political statements. One of them is definitely Swiatoslav Lunov's electroacoustic composition post, with a problem title I Accuse, that refers to Emil Zolia's famous essay in open letter addressed to Felix Faurot. Lunov posted, and it's kind of wordplay, posted this piece on his YouTube channel in early May 2022, accompanying the title with a translation into most European languages, as well as Latin, Greek, and Old Slavonic, followed by Russian. So quite an eloquent statement. He was working on it in Kiev during the first weeks after the invasion and actually never left the city for a day. So apart from being a political statement, like I accuse, it's also a reflection of witnessed trauma. What makes actually this score a document is the way composer builds a sequence of sonic events. It's mechanical sounds of guns, machine gun bursts, helicopters, fighter planes flying like over the witness head, approaching and distancing. Then the first explosions and air raid alerts eating up reality, and all this presented extremely realistic with extraordinary accuracy and culminates in a human scream followed by an equally overwhelming silence, the voice of a bird, and at the very end, a strike of a bell. I'd like us to listen a bit to this piece, and I warn you, it's really hard. And of course, it lasts like its duration time is about 23 minutes. Of course, we won't do that. Yeah, but it's a combinational point just to give you an idea how it works. It's really loud and really hard. Sorry, yeah, of course. To me, sometimes it seems to be like a sonic glossary of this war, and how actually an amazing representation of how actually violence and horror sounds. Yeah. Commemoration is another important semantic layer of this music, at least read in 2022. And it's really important for the society that mourns the victims of this war. In extremely like emotional text in this sense, for me personally, is Commerce 2022 by Leptos Borodko, with which I'd like to conclude this my presentation. This piece was composed during the summer and autumn 2022, the first year of the war, and is dedicated to all the victims of the Russian invasion. Commerce, just a bit about the title. Yeah, commerce is a term that refers to the culminating point in the Greek tragedy when the actor and the chorus beat their chests in a single burst of mourning. And this image is literally reproduced in Ms. Borodko's piece. And I'd like us to listen to it. Just a few words how personal and collective context works here, because it's important why actually a composer chose this timbre of boy. It's like really personal individual choice, because his young son, little son, plays this instrument, and to composers that was the greatest value actually, personifies in this timbre, and to lose it or would be tragedy. So it's how it actually works here, just not a statement of like grieving with everyone. I'm here, I'm grieving with you, but it's also a really personal, individual, private dimension of this expression. So just to conclude, what I briefly showed you here on the material of 2022 is evidence of so-called civilizational capacity of music culture to resistant culture as well. New formats of musical life, not to mention musical creativity, it's not just a model of resistance, but evidence of systemic changes in the cultural field, one of which is overcoming the past, which is only way for us to move forward. It's extremely important, I think, to emphasize that the fact that the agency gained by Ukrainian classical music is also unfolding as a consolidation of society, the creation of a single symbolic field of meanings and values of a society that is rethinking itself. So musical art currently plays an extremely important communicative reflective role in our society, as it not only records the tragic experience of war and loss, but also comments on and rethinks our past and present. Like other artistic practices, of course, it seems to me that Ukrainian art music these days shapes this field of common discourse within which a new identity is being comprehended, among other things. And how this model in which Ukrainian music exists will continue to develop depends largely on how long this war lasts and what will be the result. However, it's quite clear to me that the vector set in 2022 will continue. Thank you very much.
Iryna, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and for sharing this really powerful music with us. We have plenty of time for questions and answers and discussion. So please, colleagues, raise your hand if you have a question or drop your question in the chat. We had one question already in the chat, and it is, do you have any information on new music from Ukrainians in exile?
And we actually have a response to that by Dr. Iryna Tukova that Ukrainian Music in Exile was dedicated this year New York Festival of Ukrainian Music. Actually, okay, what worth mentioning. There are plenty of Ukrainian composers working abroad who respond to these events, to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, of course, and for them, it's really personal dimension and kind of political, I don't know, statement as well. Just before having this presentation, I've been listening to Anna Corson's work, Tericon. Anna is from Donbass originally, but now based in Germany for many years already. But somehow this work also reflects on her past, on her personal past, on her identity. And I don't know, I should mention also works by Maxim Sholigin, who's been living in Gag, the Netherlands, for many years. Yeah, but also respond and reflected on this war. And okay, what should we take into account? There are some restrictions for Ukrainian men to cross the border, of course. So not that many of Ukrainian composers, contemporary composers can find a shelter somewhere abroad. So most of them stay in Ukraine. However, women mostly abroad, which is also understandable. Of course. Just to be more precise, well, a few words about these composers, what kind of music they compose, or if this music is being performed. yeah, of course, it's being performed. It's gaining its agency all over the world, and which to me is extremely important. Yeah, that's another question.
Maybe I'll read it
Yeah,
for
yeah.
for the
You know, I
recording.
saw that question coming because I had a similar one at London conference just several days ago. If commemoration leads to re-traumatization for the audience. Okay, we should distinct two different situations here. Which one is like commemoration practices like concerts in memory and so on and so forth, which I actually prefer to stay away from. I don't support this kind of activities as it really, really contributes a lot to re-traumatization of the society. However, I think it's really important, and what actually this space by Lekbas Borotka shows and presents is that is building a bridge between the composer as a person, as a figure, and the audience. And what is emerging as a result of such events performing this space is a feel of community for those being in the audience presented, and I don't know, for just for Ukrainian community as well, I think. Yeah, of course, it's not the same as we commemorate our victims after the conflict, after the war is over. Of course, it's completely different and unique situation. But to me, it's really important that Ukrainian composers dare to express their attitude, their feelings, and witnessing about this war in the way they do that. Yeah, it's like you know, from it's we should consider a text of culture, a text of culture that should be comprehended, and it's how we will remember this war as well. So, and we just cannot. Okay, what I think is important is have a proper optic for these texts. So yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Iryna. Other questions for Iryna or points for discussion? Yes, Iryna Tukova, please.
Thank you very much. I am very happy to see you all, and thank you, Iryna, for your presentation. And I have a question. You presented this soundscape, but you showed the compositions which were written during 2022. It was the first year of full-scale invasion. To your point of view, if situation now change, if we compare the situation, for example, in 2022 and in 2024, because to my point of view, we have some changes, we have some differences between situation at the beginning of full-scale invasion, and now we have the third year of this invasion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really good question, of course. I said it at the very beginning of the presentation. Wait, I don't remember if I mentioned that I'm focusing exclusively on the first months of the 2022, as it was a crucial point for some changes in this turn, social cultural turn in our society. But of course, now the situation is completely different. And I'd say that oh, okay. I can't deny there was still a grieving society, of course, but there was still room for something else. Not just for nostalgia, for instance, or for like grieving on a lost paradise and so on and so forth, but for rethinking our identity, for shaping it, and I don't know, kind of establishing it. So it's music. If we are talking about music compositions, they're also different. And I'd like to mention, for instance, Sviatoslav Lunov's First January. It's known cycle, yeah, written on the verses of Ukrainian poets, which is also a kind of there is no despair in it. There is no fear, no horror in it, no that feeling of approaching catastrophe. It's something different, completely different. It's about discovering his own identity through the history of of Ukrainian literature, for instance, is a way how to resist. Another story is like, for me, really important, that what it actually means these days to be Ukrainian composer, what does national music means, and these dimensions, how and approaches of contemporary composers, how they find their way to answer this question is really important. Right now, probably not right now, just a half an hour ago, one of the newest piece written by Victoria Poliva has been performed in Switzerland, I suppose. Yeah, it's for Ukrainian Record and Baroque Orchestra. So just to conclude, yeah, just to sum up, the creativity, music creativity, it didn't stop for a single day, as well as the musical process didn't stop for a single day. And apart from this really turning point for us is a huge response to the invasion, is a tragedy. We have much more tendencies and stylistic ways to comprehend not just this situation, but where we are going to, I think. Yeah. And of course, I recall you mentioning, for instance, Igor Zavgorodny multimedia, gosh, composition, gentle word. I just wanted to listen to it today, and it's blocked, and so we cannot see it again. And I do recall you quoting quoting him that it's no longer relevant, it's no longer actual, yeah, for us and for him as well. So the context have changed significantly, and the response to this context of these circumstances is also in ongoing changes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Iryna. If others don't have a question, in the meantime, I have one, if I could ask. Iryna, you mentioned the very interesting concept of the Ukrainian Creole. That is a new concept for me, and I'm very curious about it. Could you say more about how you're conceptualizing Ukrainian Creole, and how maybe other scholars are doing the same, and what is the particular relevance to the work that you're doing?
Okay, so I used it rather in metaphorical way, but because we do know this work by Benedict Anderson is also used. It was used by him also in metaphorical way, rather. Yeah, but okay. What I meant to say that we should take into account that the Ukrainian music culture also multi-layered, polyphonical, and not that, you know, it's not just about it cannot be seen just in connection to Russian colonial policies or so. So it's Yaroslav Vysak, Ukrainian historian, reminds us constantly. So Russian colonialism used to have the character of assimilation, which means that, among others, Ukrainian authorities used to be involved in this imperial project. And for instance, if we take the music example of Ukrainian music, a lot of Ukrainian musicians contributed a lot to building the so-called great Russian music culture. So because they were just forced probably, or seeking for better opportunities to move to metropole and so on and so forth. Yeah. And so what do we do, for instance, with music written on in Soviet period, using Russian texts, Russian poetry, Russian literature, or like having kind of gosh, please help me someone with this word, конъюнктура. Yeah, so trying to compile. Yeah, is there someone to give me a hand of help with this word? Yeah, okay.
Say the word again, Iryna.
Конъюнктура, конъюнктурный. So just in order to compile with current politics and current like state of society, so to say, yeah. This happens regarding other persons, events, and phenomena. Okay, so and I think we should not. There is kind of a trap, potential trap for a researcher to keep moving this mythological frame that everything Ukrainian was banned, and they were just like repressing oppressive policies and so on and so forth. But there was a layer of music written like in consonant with current politics, for instance, or close on using just Russian sources, poetry and literature and so on and so forth. So what is that? How should we consider that? Is it a part of our past, or it should be declined, eliminated, and or we should just rethink it, reconsider it, and find a proper way, not just to abandon, but to okay, if we're just trying to return it to our current musical life, how should it be performed? Should there be some program notes or special events or like projects explaining how colonial policies worked and how it what it resulted with, and so on and so forth? So we just it's not just about decolonization is not just about to exclude Tchaikovsky and replace it with Lysenko, for instance. Yeah, we need much more intellectual, more hard intellectual efforts to understand what our Ukrainian culture of the past was and what was the factors, like obvious ones and not that obvious, that formed that kind of multi-layered culture text, and how it should be reconsidered and returned into the current musical life. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful.
Supposition for conjecture, yeah. Supposition. Oh, thank you. Probably. I should check it. Yeah. And there was a comment on
Yes, I'm sorry I missed that. Nadia Hancharenko had a comment. I don't know if I should read it, or if Nadia, if you want to engage. I guess I can go ahead and read it. She says, "Thank you very much for the impressive presentation. I would like to add to the thesis about delay work with Soviet narratives, but the initiatives to decolonize it, for example, in the history education, met with great resistance, not only from politicians, but also from many cultural figures. They were blocked and ridiculed, referring to the inadmissibility of nationalizing history, respect for multiculturalism, etc. This partly changed in 2014, more so in 2022, but there are still many defenders of Russian culture which are outside politics. Unfortunately, this is not true."
Oh, I just didn't get what exactly not true. Yeah, that was my claim about the intellectual public discourse that never happened, but I mentioned that, well, of course there were efforts, and of course just I also said that there were no relevant culture policies introduced, or laws, and so on and so forth, or politics of memory, and yeah. So under these circumstances, I think there was just impossible to provide such a broad intellectual discourse, because there was no objective, I don't know, tools for that. So the society, and yeah, I do agree with this yeah, with this command. So, but I don't really blame anyone for not having such a broad discourse, such a broad discussion back then in the 90s. It's just a fact that it's not happen, that it did not happen due to several reasons. Yeah. So, and we are facing the music, so to say, now of that political decisions as well, unfortunately. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Iryna from our colleagues? So Iryna, I did want to ask you if you could you please send Elijah the links to all of the really powerful pieces that you shared with us, and we can make those
Sure.
part of the video description when we post it. That would be really wonderful. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you once more for this really wonderful and inspiring talk, and we look forward to seeing all of you next month, if not before.